The Fariols Resource Center for Filipino Philosophy is a fledgling unit of the Philosophy Department which is focused on promoting the teaching of philosophy grounded in a Filipino rationality. It equally aims to promote research in Filipino philosophy grounded in Filipino praxis, experience, and thought. Toward this end, we have opened this YouTube channel, which will hold talks and discussions on themes that have emerged from the practice and experience of Filipino thinkers. In this video, we are sharing the reflections of graduate students of the Ateneo Philosophy Department on how Filipino thinkers have thought about the EDSA revolution. First is the exploration of Maria Ariane Areta, which examines the EDSA revolution through the lens of values theory. Second is the reading of Nigel John Buenaventura using Renilo Hermida's discourse framework. And finally, we have the reflection of Isabel Margaret Zureta on the work of Manuel B.D. These thinkers are being discussed because they provided interesting and typical perspectives of Filipino intellectuals making sense of the EDSA revolution. We hope that this video stimulates the viewer's own reflections on the EDSA event.
Hello, everybody. I am Ariane Aleta. For those who will be watching the video and don't know me, my report for today is entitled Pakikipagkapwa sa EDSA, looking at the 1986 revolution through the lens of Filipino values. And I entitled my report this way because, as you guessed it, it is about articles that look at the EDSA or the people power revolution through the lens of a Filipino philosophy. But aside from that aspect, I also wanted to see how a philosophy that focused on Filipino values looked at the revolution back then, and when the person writing the article was much closer to the actual revolution, and now, or as much now as possible, kasi the article was written in 2019, how through that difference in time, ano ba yung pagkaiba nila sa pagtingin sa EDSA. So how my report will go is that I will talk about the different articles first separately, and then I'll give my own reflections on how these two articles come together or what insights I gained from looking at them both together. Okay, so let's begin with the article written by Proserpina Tapales and Maria Concepcion Alfiler, which is Sustaining Filipino Unity, Harnessing Indigenous Values for Moral Recovery. The main question the authors had for this article is how come Filipino unity is so volatile? Like we are united for a great cause, and then once we've achieved that cause, we become disunited after. So that's really the main question that they're trying to answer here. And their answer is this: what is needed for the nation to take off is to reconcile the meaning of the indigenous core values, kapwa and pakikisama between the elite and the masses, incorporate these in projects or programs involving mass participation, and translate these into empowerment of the masses through equal sharing and redistribution. Only then will a sense of shared identity and a truer meaning of nationalism be developed, which are necessary for Filipinos to sustain unity. So that's their answer on how we can sustain a much longer lasting unity. So let's break down their answer, the important parts. So for them, they say that yes, Filipino unity is volatile, and our history is replete with examples of that. So they mentioned how we did unite after we did unite to fight against the Spaniards, and then we also united during EDSA. But after the Spanish Revolution, we became disunited, and after EDSA, our nation is still in discontent. And the author say na the volatility of our unity is due to the differing perceptions of what pakikipagkapwa means to the elite and the masses. So they say na the elite and the masses have their own perceptions of pakikipagkapwa. And when pushed, this value of pakikipagkapwa can lead to pakikibaka para sa kalayaan at katarungan. And it was for the sake of katarungan that both the elite and the masses revolted against the Spaniards back then in 1896, and why they came together to oust the Marcos dictatorship in 1986. Pero pakikipagkapwa on its own um, have different has a different feel to both the elite and the masses. For the elite, pakikipagkapwa means only pakikitungo. Pero para sa mga masa, mas mabigat ang ibig sabihin ng pakikipagkapwa. Para sa mga masa, pakikipagkapwa means pakikibahagi. The authors claim that this differing view of pakikipagkapwa is the reason for the dissolution of unity after a crisis. So how can this value of pakikipagkapwa and the sense of nationalism it spurs have common ground between the elite and the masses? The authors conjecture that a forceful and responsible leader is needed, a leader that is able to use these indigenous values, translate them into an ideology, and have programs that make sure that that ideology is realized on the ground. And I just want to say na though the authors say in the article that the differing perceptions of pakikisama between the elite and the masses must be reconciled, they ultimately say na yung elite kailangan nilang mag-bend sa perception ng mga masa. They say it here. They say, the core value of kapwa must be utilized for cooperative endeavors among the people. Kapwa and pakikisama must be translated into empowerment of the masses through equal sharing and redistribution, which is again for the masa, ito yung pakikibahagi. It is a definition which must be accepted by the elite who have attained power to make decisions. So they actually outlined 3 steps on how to make sure that this unity among us will last even after we've toppled down or got through a crisis. So they say now, 1, we must utilize indigenous values held by Filipinos. And here they mention na let us not stick to Western values. Kasi although the West can have a lot to teach us, iba din yung pananaw nila sa mundo. Na hindi din parang ready to wear na yung mga values nila para sa atin. Kasi iba din yung kung ano yung pananaw natin sa mundo, iba din syempre yung mga solusyon natin for that. So we have to utilize indigenous values held by Filipinos and then translate this into an ideology to foster unity. And hindi enough na hanggang ideology lang tayo. Kung sa Ateneo, hindi lang enough yung mema-mema lang. There has to be programs and projects that sustain this ideology to empower the people. And for this one, to they gave examples of 2 NGO programs that are already doing this to show the reader na this is possible, na this is how you do a long-lasting unity. So the 2 programs that they mentioned were the community-based health programs or CBHP, where in communities where they are quite far away from the city and they don't have easy access to health and medicine. They don't look at it na, oh, pupunta lang ang doktor doon and then i-cure na yung mga tao and that's it. Kasi that's a very elitist way daw of looking at it na parang ang kailangan lang naman nila ay doktor at hospital. For this program, they really wanted the whole community to come together and talk about how they will solve health issues in their and health accessibility in their community. And the second program that they mentioned was the Freedom from Debt Coalition. And for this one, this program also made sure na ang gumagawa ng polisiya para sa freedom from debt for our country ay hindi lang yung mga edukado, yung mga elitista, pero pati na rin yung mga masa, yung mga jeepney driver, yung mga may-ari ng bakery, kasama din sila sa paggagawa ng polisiya na iyon. So what these 2 programs highlight is really a participation of the masses and not looking down on them, but really nakikibahagi sila sa mga diskusyon na ito. So just to reiterate, na it's good to have values, Filipino values, and then turn them into an ideology. Those are the first 2 steps. But this ideology must be realized on the ground by having concrete programs that realize that ideology. So they say here, devoid of a concrete action component through which the people may experience how they may finally be empowered through these values, value reorientation by itself may serve as futile panacea to the country's seemingly endless search for a unifying force. And this article was written in 1991 during Cory Aquino's reign na. And parang ito yung nakita nila na parang nangyari nga yung EDSA, ang ganda ng pangyayari na yun. Pero how come ganito pa rin tayo? So, yun yung mga sinabi nilang solusyon. Okay, so now that, sorry, I just want to say na when I read this article, it was sad kasi I had to remind myself na I was reading something from the 1990s. Kasi if I didn't remind myself, parang yung mga problema na sinasabi niya ay mga problema din ngayon. Kaya parang sinabi ko, teka lang, hindi naman 'to sinulat sa 2026, sinulat siya noon pa. Kaya sad for me kasi ano ba 'yan, ang rami ng panahon na lumipas, pero ito pa rin yung mga problema natin. And it was also parang a good thing that I noticed is that there was a criticism of simply imposing Western values to solve our problems. So though, yun na nga, the authors, they valued Western ideas and thoughts because they did have good insights, pero they were also saying na we must look at ourselves and our values to solve our problems. And para sa para sa akin mabuti din na it didn't stop simply with philosophizing about the EDSA. Meron din siyang binigay na concrete steps and solutions, on how we can make, the unity that happened in EDSA last longer. Pero para lang sa akin, parang masyado siyang, ano ba 'yan, easy on the elite na parang they're saying, "Oh, hindi naman nila alam na ganito pala ang feeling ng mga masa, so that's why they treat us that way." Pero I'm not really sure if that's exactly what's happening, pero I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Yun. So, okay, right on to the second article, which is, written by Dr. Cristina Astorga. It's entitled "Interfacing Filipino Lakas Tawa, Power of Laughter and Lament." And for this one, what I like about this is that yung main point kasi ni Astorga dito is that nangyari yung EDSA revolution daw. It was a peaceful revolution precisely because of the Filipino characteristic of lakas tawa. And so she says that in her article. This is the abstract, and I don't have to read all of it kasi medyo mahaba siya. Pero what she's really trying to say here is that yung Filipino lakas tawa, she doesn't stop there kasi in her article. She also talks about lament. But then she doesn't use lament to view EDSA. She uses lament to view the black community in America where she is based na already. And then she says na lakas tawa and lament are two differing ways of two differing aspects of a human reality. So since she doesn't really focus, she doesn't use lament to focus on EDSA, I will only look at the part wherein she does look at EDSA, which is lakas tawa. So for her, she says na the Filipino character of Lakas Tawa fueled the peaceful people power revolution of 1986. Why? Bakit? Because of Lakas Tawa, we were able to transcend, to go beyond our reality and see a much bigger reality. Kaya nagkaroon yung people power revolution at hindi siya yung violent na revolution. It was a peaceful one. And so how was Lakas Tawa able to do that? So she expounds by explaining the three characteristics of Lakas Tawa. So Lakas Tawa, as she says, is paradoxical in content and spirit, creative of relationships and community, and personally and socially transformative. So it Lakas Tawa is paradoxical because it enables one to make light of the tenses of situation. So the inherent paradoxical characteristic of Lakas Tawa, she says, is similar to the incongruities that that uh, that is in the Bible. Dr. Astorga kasi is a theologian. She's not necessarily a philosopher. So her article has inputs from the Bible, or she uses her reflections on the Bible while she was writing her article. So for her, the inherent paradoxical characteristic of lakas tawa is similar to the incongruities that God gave. And the incongruities that God gave in the Bible, they're moments of joy. So that's why yung paradoxical in content and spirit, it enables you to parang see the situation in a different way, or through a bigger lens. And then she says that it's also creative of relationships and community because when you laugh with one another, you bond together. And again, you're able to go out of yourself. Nakikita, when you laugh with another person, nakikita niyo yung parang, oh, this is such a ridiculous human situation na, and then pinagtatawanan niyo na lang yung sarili ninyo. That's how you're able to bond. And these two characteristics, paradoxical and creative of relationships and community, these are also what makes the lakas tawa personally and socially transformative. So Astorga says na it is personally and socially transformative because it allows one to look beyond their own reality, to see the realities perhaps through the much bigger eyes of God. She says, and I quote, "We relativize our own importance and restore God at the center. Laughter is not a way of denying tears, but rather a way of affirming which is deeper than tears. It enables people to lift themselves out of themselves for a reality greater than themselves and be profoundly transformed." End quote. So I just want to say that Dr. Astorga gave a very good image when she wrote this part. Sinabi niya na um she gave kasi an example of how it was the Lakas Tawa was paradoxical, and then it was also creative of relationships and community, and it was also personally and socially transformative with the image that she gave. Kasi she mentioned how apparently, kasi 'di ba the EDSA happened 4 days. Unlike popular thought na isang araw lang siya, it happened through like 4 days, and then parang at the end of a certain day, yung mga military na loyal to Marcos as they were driving away, yung mga EDSA revolutionists nagsabi pa sa kanila na, "Goodbye po sir, see you po tomorrow." So parang yun, nakikita dun na parang even in that tense situation, um, the people, at least the revolutionists, were able to see na we are in a fight. I mean, we, the EDSA revolutionists, are in a fight with you, but I can see na you too are human. So parang they're able to transcend the situation that they are in. And so nata-transform din sila personally and socially. And there was also another example that she gave na parang yung mga EDSA revolutionists, they were singing, and then they were dancing, and then they were eating. And then there's this one very profound image that she mentioned na of a person on the other side of the barricade, the EDSA revolutionists, they gave food to the military. So again, they're seeing na, oo nga, nag-aaway tayo, pero, I can see na you are human too, and so I will give you food because I know you are also hungry. So the Lakas Tawa is able, as Dr. Astorga says, is able to lift one out of their situation and see things from a much bigger reality or a much bigger lens. And so he says here, because she is juxtaposing Lakas Tawa and Lament. She says na both of these characteristics, both Lakas Tawa and Lament have these similar characteristics. They are paradoxical, they allow one to be self-transcendent or to transcend oneself, and it is also subversive. And I just want to talk more about the subversive side of Lakas Tawa kasi I didn't get to say that with the second bullet point. Lakasawa is subversive because the joy that laughter brings about allows one to look at things differently or in a different way. And for Dr. Astorga, Lakastawa, as it was exemplified in the EDSA revolution, was subversive kasi yung nangyaring revolution, it wasn't like other revolutions na it wasn't bloody, there were no guns fired. It was a peaceful revolution. And through that, it was subversive of what people might thought as a revolution should be. And that was, for Dr. Astorga, happened because of yun na nga, yung characteristic ng Lakas Tawa. So for her, she says this during the end parts of her article. She says, laughter sees beyond darkness and plumbs deeper than the tears. Drawing its collective force from networks of solidarity built through communal eating, dancing, singing, and praying, laughter finally ousted a 20-year cruel dictatorship without one single shot fired, a witness to the reality and power of nonviolent resistance in the world. So, para sa akin, in this article, alam ko na for Dr. Astorga, she only used Lakas Tawa to view the EDSA. Pero if I were to parang expound on her article, I would also use Lament to view the EDSA kasi I think both Lakas Tawa and Lament could be woven, parang these were the two characteristics that wove together for the blossoming of the peaceful revolution. So if I were to write an article about to continue this article, I would use Lament then to also view at EDSA and how these two characteristics they interplayed para nga sa peaceful revolution. Kasi I think the article it was good kasi parang at least how Dr. Astorga talked about it, parang ang hopeful ng revolution, and it was so beautiful na when I was reading it, it made me have goosebumps because it made me feel proud of us. Pero I believe it romanticized the revolution too much, which is surprising because I thought na the older article would be the one to romanticize EDSA more kasi siya yung mas malapit sa revolution. But it was the more recent article that did that. And maybe it's because parang iba na yung pananaw sa EDSA siguro na parang we don't really see na yes, it was peaceful, but there was also a lot of violence that happened even before that. Okay. So what do I think now when I look at both of these articles together? Well, since both of these articles looked at the EDSA revolution through the lens of Filipino values or Filipino philosophy, para sa akin, mas grounded siya kasi mas nagre-resonate siya sa akin, alam ko anong ibig sabihin na, tumawa ng malakas, alam ko anong ibig sabihin tumawa with people here, in a community in the Philippines and paano yun nakakabuo ng mga komunidad. Alam ko din yung pakikipagkapwa, alam ko aside from knowing what these mean, I know how they feel from my reality. So, they are more grounded to me kasi it didn't just use Western values to look at a Philippine revolution, or a Philippine situation. It used our own values. And that's what I appreciated from both of these articles. And that's parang na-realize ko na oo nga, may saysay ang paggagawa or pagpapatuloy ng Filipino philosophy. Kasi baka yun, most likely yun ang mas makaka-relate yung other Filipinos. Pero as I was also looking at it, parang hanggang sa enough na ba na i-continue ang Filipino philosophy para umunlad ang Pilipinas? Para sa akin, there has to be something more than that na parang at like what happened in the first article, there has to be more concrete steps. So, yes, Filipino philosophy, that's good. Pero we have to follow that up with steps on the ground and we have to include people from the masses. Kumbaga, if the West thinks of philosophy as an ivory tower kind of occupation, I would want to say na Filipino philosophy is from the ground talaga. And from that ground, then we do the concrete steps. So that's it from me. Thank you so much for listening. And I hope you learned a lot about pakikipagkapwa sa EDSA.
Okay. So, good morning, everyone. I am Nigel Bonaventura. I will be presenting my reflections after the EDSA revolution, primarily about the consolidation of democratic values through civil society organizations. So, there are many things mentioned in the book of Dr. Hermida about his own assessment of the Philippine democratic experiment, primarily using a Habermasian assessment. So, bago po ang lahat, as an outline, the major interlocutor of Dr. Hermida is Jürgen Habermas. Primarily, his critical analysis on democratic institutions, primarily in the modern world. Pero bago po yun, as I begin, I would like to first respond to the question. So why is this analysis a critical, a philosophical analysis? And first and foremost, it is because Habermas wants to view the world as primarily democratic virtues as something we ought to achieve, we ought to find, we ought to realize that there is truly a difference between living in a democracy and living democratically. So at the same time that Habermas disproves of the modernist appropriation of rationality in restricting positivist and instrumentalist approaches. So primarily, he calls the current world a post-metaphysical world wherein the truth or certain norms and virtues or for that matter dito po sa usapan na to democratic values, they in a nutshell hindi siya one size fit all. So marami ng conceptions, there are many conceptions of how we value, how we understand, interpret what democracy is. So I would like to start there. Of course, also later on, there will be criticisms, primarily the limitations of Habermas's viewpoint as he weren't able to present concrete procedural approaches, primarily towards how to view and understand the current legal system of the Philippines. But before that, I will present the major arguments of the book, and I divided it into two parts. Primarily, the first part will refer to will primarily refer to the major arguments of Habermas as stated by Hermida, And the second part, we will talk about the experience of the Philippines, the Philippine experience on democratization. And of course, I will the last part is I will give my own reflections, primarily how it was able to affect the relevance of civil society organizations in preserving and promoting democracy. Okay. So first and foremost, I would like to point out that the book talks about the relationship of law and democracy, that these two things are actually inseparable. That the law is important in legitimizing democratic claims and vice versa. So in the Philippine experience, we know that the enactment of the law does not guarantee its validity. So, halimbawa sa setup po natin, 'di ba, sa realidad natin, 'di ba, yung mga mambabatas natin, yung mga kumakatawan talaga sa taong bayan, hindi naman talaga sila yung tunay na kumakatawan sa sambayanan, 'di ba? Parang and even if you will, just ask people randomly, primarily just a random Filipino, tanungin mo kung meron ba talaga silang alam o kinalaman sa pagbuo ng isang ordinansya o batas, hindi naman talaga sasagot 'yan na meron siyang formal or even informal relevance to the decision making process. So here, 'di ba, this is a disjunct between facticity and validity. Meaning, true, factually, there is the law, there is a written text on how we proceed on how democracy is ought to be practiced, but its validity is another question. So, moving on. So, furthermore, legitimacy talks about the autonomy of citizens or primarily the capacity of citizens to assert themselves in the democratic process. But yun nga, right now in the modern world, the worldviews are dispersed. In the book, actually, Hermida talks about the historical conception of how democracy is understood, primarily based on the social contract theory. Pero bago yon, we have to understand that before, there is actually it's easier to understand worldviews because the world is monolithic. Primarily, when monarchies are still present, di ba? Yung konsepto ng mabuti, yung konsepto ng pamumuno, ng kabutihan, ng magandang buhay, it's easily understood as there are already prescribed or there are already dominant preconceived notions of how we go about or how we embrace something that is considered ideal. But right now, it's different. We have varying points of view, and primarily through the practice of democracy, through the principle of having freedom of speech, the principle of freedom of expression, people are able to actually communicate their varying worldviews or their different conditions, life worlds, narratives, and intentions. But here, the major argument that Hermida presents, the Habermasian concept of communicative action, wherein democracy and its validity is actually practiced. So the principle of discourse, that there is actually that language is the main medium, and this is the primary source of social integration. Now, before I proceed, social integration, although we have a law, although we have strong democratic institutions or we have ideal democratic institutions, it does not guarantee that integration is present. But what guarantees it is that there is discourse, nag-uusap, nagkakaroon ng komunikasyon yung mga tao sa isang lipunan. Moving on. So, the concept of communicative action leads to the establishment of a social relationship among dialogical participants, equal. Okay, they don't manipulate, they don't look into people as objects to certain ends. There is no backstabbing for that matter, but rather there is a consolidation of democratic values wherein these people are talking amongst each other, trying to understand their own realities. So, magandang example na gusto ko pong ibahagi dito, yung nung 2022, I experienced one of the initiatives of SLB, Simbahan ng Pagbayan. It's an NGO, primarily when they spearheaded Kwentuhang Bayan, wherein they ask people to talk about their aspirations, their feelings, well, about the upcoming 2022 presidential elections. But what I realized there is that the conversation is trying to bring back the narrative to the people. The people are talking with each other. The people trying to produce a narrative, their own democratic narrative. It is not actually it's not actually trying to penetrate what is considered formal or what is considered official, which is of course within the reins of government. Hindi yun yung focus, but rather nagkwekwentuhan, inuunawa ang isa't isa. Nagkakaroon ng pag-uunawa sa buhay ng isa't isa. And then, this course ends in a consensus, and if there are reasons that are valid, then we proceed. If not, people are free to be challenged, and so the discursive process continues. And again, I will continue, I will revolve around this argument. I will hold on to this argument as I present, as I continue my presentation, which is communicative action. Okay, so I already said this, just to reiterate, communicative action does not guarantee social integration. But although the law generates its principle, Habermas proposes a reconstruction of democracy. So just to go back to what I said a while ago, there is a difference between living in a democracy and living democratically. And again, to reiterate, this book is a philosophical and a critical approach because it tends to look into the ethos of how to live to live the principles of democracy rather than trying to only assert the ideations of a written constitution. So moving on. Habermas proposes a reconstruction of democracy through the relationship of individual rights and popular sovereignty. But here, in this segment, Hermida talks about the relevance of social contract theories. Primarily, the classical liberal point of view and the Republican point of view. The classical liberal point of view views, of course, structural or state institutions as unnecessary evil. First and foremost, for classical liberals, what's the most important thing is to protect individual freedoms. Mangingialam lang o papasok lang ng Estado as an arbiter, as an umpire. But yun nga, sinasabi dito na hindi ito sapat. This is not enough to make sure that democratic values are to be reevaluated or to be relived by people. On the second note, Republican values points out that public autonomy or the public being able to assert what they want through popular sovereignty, like our case, but primarily nakikita lang natin yung popular sovereignty during elections. Andun lang siya lagi nakaangkla. But according to Hermida, it's supposed to be the primordial relationship between both. That yes, the basic freedoms of people are protected, and at the same time, there is also the spirit of public expression, the spirit of the public acceding to certain written texts, but they are both required, public and private autonomy, in order to actually realize the true value of democracy. So here, how does it relate to communicative action. It relates to communicative action because the extreme point, I'll just return to the previous slide, the extreme liberal point of view wants just is just to focus on the self, on the individual, the I, whereas the other argument, the Republican point of view, has the danger or may lead to the danger of actually losing the importance of individual sentiments. So it's supposed to be again a cross or a meeting, a consensus between the two. So moving on. So communicative action entails the institutionalization of the communicative process. It must be normalized in the way we proceed as democratic citizens. So it rationalizes political will through discourse, which is integral in the lawmaking process. But then again, here, even my own reflection, I don't see any clear or procedural suggestions from Habermas with regards to how um, how this political will is institutionalized through procedural ways. But then again, I think, and my own reflection here is that it should begin with our own conversations within our own democratic spaces, our own circles, wherein people are free to discuss their own ideas, where they are able to receive criticism and give criticism in turn, and trying to realize a single goal, which is the realization of democracy, the realization of pakikipagkapwa-tao. Moving on. So, the concept of communicative action entails the institutionalization of the communicative process as it is the universal combination and reciprocal mediation of legally institutionalized and non-institutionalized popular sovereignty. So, just to add, it means that communicative action, you are not only focused in the formal decision-making process, which means, again, it is to enter the range of government, nor it is not simply focused on the informal apparatus, which is to influence the formal decision-making process, but rather it is just to proceed in a discursive way that you consider every citizen as a co-equal, as a co-journeyer in the realization of these virtues. But then again, when we say institutionalization and its formalizations, it is still far from being realized in today's society. So the second part, now I'm moving on to the second part. There are many actually points. There are three major points that Hermida presented in his book. Number one, the Philippine Constitution, party list systems, and civil society organizations. Again, I would like to focus on the Constitution and civil society organizations. But uh, alam naman natin that in the Philippines is the oldest democracy in Southeast Asia. Primarily, simula pa ng Malolos Constitution, we already have an experience of how we conduct democracy. And of course, alongside will be its pitfalls, alongside will be its frustrations and challenges. But others may say, oh, ano yung silbi ng constitution ngayon? Para saan yan? Parang, especially in the world, right, in our current situation right now, wherein it seems that the rule of law isn't present, as if the rule of law is actually a burden rather than a blueprint towards achieving a better life. But again, the Philippine Constitution is present as it is there to illuminate the horizon of a given society in view of the project of realizing the system of rights. So, kumbaga parang sige, maaaring we are experiencing paradoxes, we are experiencing frustrations. We may be here experiencing a lot of problems about how our democracy is considered inauthentic. But at the end of the day, we still have this utopian text to guide us. We have this we have this end, this telos to end into this end, this certain goal uh, as a community to reach. But then again, of course, primarily the 87 Constitution is a sequel to the success of the struggle to bring down an autocratic regime. And if I may add, the Philippine Constitution was actually the first, according to Hermida, the first charter written through or anchored to the democratic process, as there is a constitutional convention that wrote it, that represented the people on their behalf and wrote it. Of course, the Constitutional Convention was represented by certain people, representative from the varying sectors of society. Anyway, now moving on. Why are CSOs important anyway, or civil society organizations important? We have to take into consideration that during during the EDSA revolution, civil society organizations, various sectors are actually essential, instrumental in consolidating the success of the revolution. Kung halimbawa, kung wala naman ang mga eskwelahan, wala ang simbahan, wala ang mga negosyante, kung wala naman talaga yung private sector in particular, hindi naman magsasucceed yun, yung revolution, yung pagtanggal sa rehimeng Marcos. But then again, although civil society organizations are instrumental in that regard, it does not have to stop there, but rather it must move beyond its traditional function. It must go beyond the defense of democracy. It must go beyond reacting against autocratic tendencies. So CSOs, or civil society organizations, still, as we speak, they are struggling from being accommodated, primarily when you say the center, the formal process, and the primary goal of both the government and the people is to realize the democratic prospects indicated by the Constitution, which is, of course, the CSOs are may mediate between these two sectors, the state and the society. So CSOs, they enlarge the democratic base for political decision making. They give a democratic space, and they must push for a more democratic culture and practice widely accepted in the Philippines. Here, going back to communicative action may be realized, or CSOs actually may serve as a good herald, may herald these ideals, and give them a place, people, a place to actually start their discourse, start their conversations, and their own realizations of a democratic society. Furthermore, CSOs, they actualize the potential to initiate reforms to generate civic awareness. But here is the current challenge, that the CSOs must go beyond their traditional function. They must go beyond being reactive or defensive in terms of their political actions. Ang ibig sabihin po nito, 'di ba, yung mga CSOs, yung trabaho nila, yung ginawa nila is tulad nung tingin natin nung nangyari nung EDSA, yung iba't ibang sektor ng lipunan, sila yung naging mahalaga, sila yung naging instrumental in order to call people to EDSA, call people to action, pero hindi dapat yun lang. Yun yung point. Dapat yung CSOs, maging normal siya, at maintindihan natin na hindi lang nagkakaroon ng democratic participation ang tao through the formal process, primarily sa pagbibigay ng pahintulot sa mga taong mamumuno sa atin. What's my point? To reiterate my point, ibig sabihin, di ba, iniisip po natin kasi lagi na, o karamihan ng tao, yung naratibo, is ang sigla-sigla, politics is very vibrant, or the concept of politics is vibrant to the common Filipino, primarily during the event of presidential or senatorial campaigns. But after that, they will now be casted away. They will be silent. Parang wala na, tapos na yung political participation after giving the right for people to represent them in the reins of government. It ends there. But yun nga hindi po dapat nagsisimula o nagtatapos yung yung konsepto ng politika sa pagbibigay pahintulot sa mga mamumuno sa atin. Dapat beyond. And CSOs can cultivate that. Primarily, CSOs can serve to augment or to help us respond to people who are underrepresented, who are marginalized, who actually do not have a place in the democratic space, in the greater democratic space. Um, so therefore, Hermida argues that CSOs must learn how to settle more peaceably the ideological differences and their petty squabbles. What's the point? Diba? Even, for example, kitang-kita po natin itong halimbawa na to. Diba? Halimbawa, kahit sa loob ng Kongreso, yung mga progresibong partido na halos iisa naman talaga yung ano nila, yung kanilang pinaglalaban, pero iba-iba yung kanilang grupo. Nahihirapan silang i-consolidate yung kapangyarihan. Minsan wala nananalo, wala nakakapasok dun sa formal process. So, therefore, di ba, CSOs must serve as a complementary function to formal political institutions, and their role to marshalling the kind of political influence that is necessary and adequate to counter undemocratic directions in the legislature. So, yon, it may not be formal, it may not be part of the legislative process, but yun nga, even the Constitution itself is promoting the existence or formalizing the presence of these CSOs to actually to be in existence, to be recognized by the state, and they are recognized actually as an ally in realizing the greater goals of society. So the Philippine Constitution is a utopian text. It offers insights into why the discrepancy exists between the optimum design for a social system outlined in the Philippine Constitution and the chronically dismal performance of the Philippines as a supposedly genuine democratic society. Again, just to sum up, um, we have a lot of frustrations throughout maybe the century of how democracy is truly, whether democracy is actually an ideal system for the Filipino people. But the Constitution is one of the evidences, one of the manifestations that indeed there are true and authentic aspirations of how to truly end up and realize a genuine democratic society. So it indicates how democracy can thrive according to the normative parameters laid down by Habermas. So this is my last slide actually, but just to give a short conclusion, ay yung ano po, yung kahulugan po nito, umiikot lang po yung reflection.
So, good morning, everyone. I'm Isabella Zoreta, and I'm going to report on emergent ethics in EDSA. So, I'll be using two papers. Next slide po. Yes, going to be using two papers, both by Dr. Manuel Lee Jr., an outline of Filipino ethics, and on truth, justice, and people power too. Now, both of these articles touch upon EDSA, but on different accounts. The first article will touch upon the EDSA revolution, the first EDSA revolution that overthrew the Marcos dictatorship. And the second article, I don't see this being talked about as much as I um, have seen it being talked about on a philosophical lens. Pero this touches upon the second EDSA revolution, EDSA DOS, that overthrew naman the era presidency. So both of these express an account of people power um, using emergent ethics in the Filipino values. So next slide. So unahin ko yung outline of Filipino ethics. Next slide. Yan. So, Dr. D would say that the People Power Revolution is a founding event where people power was seen as a site for national reconstruction. This he sees this as a starting point for reconstructing the Filipino character from which he will draw upon a new project of a Filipino ethics. And this event was considered because this is where Filipinos have shown their strengths and overcame their weaknesses as a people. And this is also where the very notion of a Filipino ethics is to be constructed from. Because this event brought surface Filipino values, both reinterpreted and rediscovered. So next slide. So what is an ethics, a Filipino ethics, after or post EDSA? This is what Dr. D would call axiological ethics. Axiological because it is grounded on values, grounded in the heart. No? This was unlike a Western rather framework of ethics like the ontological frameworks or ethics of form and matter that would highlight rationality, Dr. D would think that ethics that is grounded in the heart and intuition is more attuned to the Filipino psyche. And this what was transpiring through during the People Power Revolution was reason that was guided by the heart. Kasi this was where Filipinos at the time were spontaneous in responding to the call of the moment, especially when you go back in history, the call made by Cardinal Sin, during in Radyo Veritas, that was the spark of yun nga, dun nga nagsimula na pumasok yung mga tao sa EDSA. So very spontaneous, no? Very spontaneous to respond to the call of the moment. And it was brought about by a lot of things, no? From the assassination of Ninoy Aquino to um, uprisings by students and also by people in the countryside. No? And Scheller, he would call on Scheller at this point, would say that values are objects of our intentional feelings, where the heart has a different kind of meaning that would drive us to an ought to be and an ought to do. So, in other words, these values would drive people to do something that ought to be. So, these would drive us to do something that ought to be, but was clearly manifested in people power. So, what kind of values would be in an axiological Filipino ethics? So, first of that is solidarity. No? Solidarity um, is an ethics of responsibility where one is able to give a response to the demand of the situation and the need of one's neighbor. So, power was done in contrast to a monopoly of one man or one family. So, solidarity, um, they would translate this as kapit-bisig. Kasi, literally, these people, nagkapit-bisig sila, the front lines of those mga madre, mga religious, and other people. No? Kapit-bisig sila against the military tanks, the soldiers, no, that were trying to disperse them. So they were kapit-bisig against Marcos and his soldiers. Then this was where the people urged others to say, sumama ka, makiisa ka sa amin. Yun yung mga sigisigaw nila sa mga soldiers at the time, no? To urge the soldiers to join them in rallying against the Marcoses. No? And people power na has become the site where rich and poor would share everything with each other, where the disabled are looked after, where the soldiers are protected, and each person was responsible to one another. So dito nagmanifest yung value of pagkakaisa, no? And solidarity is imperative of the Filipino, as they would mention, because of geographical and regional differences. We have 700, 7,000 rather islands, 7,000 or so islands divided by regions with their own languages, ideologies, and solidarity may primarily be the way to our survival as a nation because um we cannot do anything without each other. And this is a call manifested during the people power because these are people with differences. They didn't mind their own differences. They just came together for a single goal, no? And that is to liberate the Filipino nation from the dictatorship. And this would highlight no, pakikipagkapwa. That is a conviction that the other, though different, is a fellow person that deserves respect, attention, and love. So next slide. So the next values that we would say that is part of an axiological ethics is truth, justice, and human rights. So all of these, no, iisa lang siya. Sinabi ni Dee, na iisa lang siya because without truth, without justice, there will be no um, importance to human rights. Sabi dito, to speak of truth and justice is to speak of rights as well and to demand one's rights to fulfill an obligation. So, people power now became a site of standing for the truth against countless abuses of power and violations against human rights. And this was a revolt against social injustice. And these pressing problems that are facing the country is facing today. Not only just today, but also nung the past, no? This can be boiled down to the devaluing of truth and justice and a lack of respect for human rights. Kasi this is where because um, without truth, no, without truth, um, without a place where people partake in a collective sort of truth, um, some people, dominant people, would have a monopoly over it and would seek to erase the truth, would seek to erase the truth to keep them in power. And so, what would unite truth and justice is human dignity, where truth is gifted to a person with an openness to know it, and justice is rendering what is due to a person in their inviolable uniqueness and irreducibility. And to speak of um, justice and dignity, again, is to speak unavoidably of rights. And what is inviolable for a person is to live decently, work humanly, and earn the fruits of their labor, to be educated and express their thoughts and share in the riches of the earth. And one is obliged to make this reality for other people. And this is our obligation as human beings, as Filipinos especially, to make these inviolable truths, these inviolable justices, be a reality for other people. So next slide. So, ito yung emphasis din ni D, no, sa um, People Power Revolution. It was non-violent. It was a non-violent revolution because the Filipinos are a peace-loving people, sabi niya. Um, ayun. So, they used persuasion or pakikiusap to persuade other members of the military to join them. And the counterpart of violence, yun yung counter nila, is usapan or dialogue. So, again, the people in the front lines and the people around that during that time, no, they were persuading the military to join their to join them against with Riley against the Marcoses. And yun, nakiusap sila. They established a dialogue between people that were previously feared, people that were previously um, enemies, no? And sabi dito, hindi nawawala yung peace. Di nawawala pala yung justice sa peace, no? Peace kasi is ultimately grounded on justice, and justice can be redeemed without using violence. So next slide. Yeah. The last of the axiological ethics, no, is the value of the holy. We see in the front lines again, religious people, who the person who called for the people, for people to go to EDSA was Cardinal Sin, sa Radyo Veritas. So, merong sense of the value of the holy, where God is the God of history, and He is one with making the history of the people. People power was the event where the religiosity of the people reigned and manifested that God liberated the people. So there was a need to recognize that all persons were brothers and sisters under God. And this is where religiosity, was very prominent through prayers during that time. Masses were also celebrated during that time. Images were carried. Images of Mary were carried. Merong mga donations outside the metro, and this is where it has been manifested that God had liberated the Filipino people. Yung saying na nasa Diyos ang awa, nasa tao ang gawa can be interpreted in the light of the revolution, where the people took action following prayer. So it was not enough that people would pray, no. It was not enough, no, siguro that people would ask God for intervention. Kasi nga um they were the ones who did the work. They were the ones also who did the action. It was the spirit, their religiosity, ultimately that inspired them to take action, to take movement against this injustices. And that was the thing that inspired them to go out into the streets and um, rally for justice. So next slide. And ultimately, an axiological ethics is also a critique of values. No? It's not enough that the values that I mentioned are included. No, it must also be a critique. Kasi a Filipino ethics should also critique traditional values that should be reevaluated in reconstructing the Filipino identity. This people power became the site where the traditional values that Filipinos were expected to be timid, complacent, and lack the drive to speak. No, this is where those values were overcome. Family values were also reconstructed in the way that um, your concern was not only of your immediate family, but also with other families to make history. Colonial mentality was also cast aside, where foreign media were mere spectators, and Radyo Veritas and the Filipinos were the ones who drove the revolution on their own. And pakikisama, the value of pakikisama was not done um, per faction, per region, per um, belief, no, but is also used for freedom, truth, and justice. Kumbaga, pakikisama with other people, despite differences. And traditional values such as that of bahala na, kanya-kanya, colonial mentality, no, it is um it is asked for us to reevaluate because of their ambivalence. Culture now doesn't become a passive acceptance of what was been handed down um, to us by other generations, by our ninuno, by our parents, by our immediate families, but it's also what is making present these values to what they intend to become in the future. Kumbaga, seeing how these values would resonate in the present, how these values would be applied in the present, and how could they become better or would redefine the Filipino identity in the future. So next slide. Yeah, so this is on truth, justice, and people power too. No, next slide. So this um Dr. D would use Marcel to argue that truth and justice are ultimately rooted in the holy, and the sacred is what would link both truth and justice. So lalabas na naman yung truth and justice, but maybe perhaps in a more different sense compared to EDSA 1, no? Which is more rooted in sacredness or religiosity or the holy. And how holiness has been manifested in truth and justice was described in the events leading up to People Power 2 or EDSA 2, which was an uprising that overthrew then President Joseph Erap Estrada. So next slide. So truth and justice, no? Truth is syempre there are different kinds of truths. Pero if the truth that you have is something that is one is willing to live and die for, that is the truth that is related to justice. Justice, on the other hand, would be given one what is true to them. And what is true to the human person, especially, is their human dignity, their inviolability, etc. And as values, both are objects of our intentional feeling and make a difference in our lives. No? And how would we see truth and justice and holiness? And truth and justice is linked in the holy, where an oath to be true and just is made in the name of God, and who is the source of all truth and justice. So next slide. Yun. So those who testified against Estrada were bringing themselves into agreements with a demand which has to express itself in us and cannot be stifled. They testified to what they saw and know and brought justice to the Filipino people as a response to a demand from God or from a transcendent reality. So ang example dito ni D was Perfecto Yasay, no? He had contradicting state testimonies when he was asked in the Blue Ribbon Committee. Pero when he was interviewed by media, no, he said that those testimonies were under threats to his life, and he contradicted his previous testimonies that were said under oath kasi nga they um he was being threatened. Um, yun. So, those nga who testified themselves against Estrada were bringing themselves into a demand to bring the truth because of a transcendent reality. And if one resorts to technicalities to hide the truth, no, out of personal, this is out of personal and partisan interests. And this is where the law um, is where we have to be reminded that the law is made for man and not man for the law. To resort to the technicalities is to forget the spirit of the law and not heeding to the call of God or the call of transcendence. So, what is the call of the transcendent? The call of the transcendent is something that would express itself in truth, a spirit and light. And seeing, in this example, no, the light that the impeachment trial that was going on for Estrada was false, was a show, merely a show. And there was going to be no justice because truth was stifled. And truth as light would bring solidarity to those who seek justice. And truth now drove people to text each other to go out into the streets in EDSA. And it is by, ayun nga, spontaneous, very spontaneous. It was a call for both truth and justice. And in EDSA, again, this has become a site where truth and justice coincided. And yun nga, called that ERAP was guilty for the charges. And again, they asked the military to join them, and they defected to the side of the truth. And the transcendent was now the one who gave us the strength and the courage to testify because he is the source of all truth and justice. And People Power 2 then was a gift to the Filipino people because this is where this has been become a site for inspiration again a few years after no this was being a site of inspiration for the Filipinos to stand again for the truth and not go again not um, fall into the trap of injustice. So next slide. Yan. Ito yung thoughts ko about both of the articles. Both of the accounts of people power have brought to light one thing that people power has become deeply rooted in the Filipino spirit and brought to light important Filipino values, um, like truth, justice, solidarity, etc. No? However, as a characteristic of these values, one must also critique if the values from 40 years ago still hold or should be restructured and reevaluated. Because again, um, an emergent with the emergent ethics from EDSA, no, one must look at how Filipino values have endured or how have they adjusted or how have they responded to calls for the times um, 40 years after. So do calls for solidarity still hold? Nagkakaroon pa rin ba ng may iba na bang definition of truth and justice, especially with changing rapidly changing times? Yun yung mga questions na kailangan pag-isipan. So, right now, we are experiencing sudden rising and equal sudden dwindling of social movements in the Philippines. It is important now to assess how best to organize movements, sustain momentum, and continuously hold accountable those in positions of power. Because again, no, um, the people that were revolted against 40 years ago nung Marcos dictatorship and um shortly after no yung kay Estrada no both of them have re-emerged in some way or another in the political spaces. So that made me think no parang okay they were ousted. But why are their children still present in the political spaces, in the political arena? Bakit hanggang ngayon meron tayong other Marcos presidency hanggang ngayon um at parang labas-pasok si Estrada sa kulungan, 'di ba? etc. And their children as well, no? That are still perpetuating cycle of violence, cycle of abuse of power, cycle of corruption. And right now, with social movements pertaining to corruption scandals, no, uh, minsan malakas yung momentum niya at first, pero it would die down slowly, no? How can we best sustain them? How can we best sustain these momentums of social movements? How can we hold continuously hold accountable those in positions of power who are just waiting for the scandal to die down. Ngayon, hindi na masyadong pinag-uusapan yung corruption. Ngayon, nag-close na yung investigations ng um, nag-close na investigations or nag-close na yung mga hearings rather. So what now? What should we do now? What are we being called to do now? How can we best encourage people or how can we still fight for against injustice in light of this situation. So those are some things that we should think about, and those are some values, no, that we should reevaluate. Would they still hold, or what values or what ethics right now would emerge in light of um, these current events that are happening in our nation today? So I think that's the end of my report. Thank you very much.